All right, it is a Thursday night, and after almost 2 months of being gone, Trusty is back. And I don't even know if anyone's going to be watching this because I had barely even announced that I was going to be back. So we'll just kind of see how the night goes. Oh, it looks like we've got a couple people coming in. If you are watching this near your telephone or your computer, you can join the live chat because this is, for the first time in a while, a live conversation. And because I'm out of practice, I couldn't even find my lights set up to do this. I had to bring in some backup, bring in some friends to help me out. And so this evening, in addition to myself, we've got a couple of friends coming back. We've got the one and only Nate. And then in addition to that, we've got a surprise guest from the East Coast. We've got Scott from the Old Curiosity Shop. So we got the men of YouTube. We've got Trusty, Scott, and Nate. So how you gentlemen doing tonight?
I'm doing great. So nice to have you back, Patrick. I felt like a widow to the stage these last 2 months.
It's good to be back. I will say I've enjoyed being in community theater. For those that had lost a track or interest in my channel, I have been doing Clue on stage. It's the stage version of the movie, and it opened last week and it closes this coming weekend. And they chose to do our pickup rehearsal on Wednesday night instead of Thursday, which is the norm. So suddenly I had a Thursday free for the first time in almost 2 months. So I decided to come live. So I'm not even doing a sale. We're just going to do this as a little bit of a chat. Hopefully everyone knows Scott from the Old Curiosity Shop. So hello, Scott. So he's been very active in his YouTube world and sharing all kinds of fun stuff. And I hadn't talked to Nate in a long time. And I invited Katie as well, but unfortunately, Katie was not available for this evening. So it's just us guys. So what have you been up to, Scott?
Oh, I have been shopping, thrifting. I have been chasing down leads. I am currently in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, headed back tomorrow morning. So I actually had to deliver some items that I sold, some large items, a furniture item that I said I would deliver in my truck. And it gave me an excuse to come out here and do some shopping.
Oh, that's nice. Now you're based, for people that don't know, you're based in Philly. So then how far is Lancaster County is like Amish country, right? Like the Amish,
a good deal of it is, yes.
How far is that from Philly?
Oh, you can be there in an hour and.
Oh, so it's pretty close.
Yeah, less than way less than an hour and a half, depending on which way you go. About an hour and a half or so.
Excellent. Yeah. So we've got some familiar names that are joining us in the chat. Karen Dondelinger coming in from San Francisco. Thanks for joining, Karen. Glad to see you. And we've got Proud American. We've got Delbert coming in from Ohio. Love trying to figure out your little thumbnail there, if that's a real dog or if that's a stuffed dog. It kind of looks stuffed. I have a feeling it's real. So Fluffy Otter saying that Lancaster County is almost her backyard.
Where are you, Fluffy?
Yeah, so I actually don't know where you're at, Fluffy. So my daughter went to school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, so kind of near Harrisburg. And I've been to Lancaster County a couple of times, but I can't say I'm overly familiar with it.
Well, one of the slightly, I wouldn't say off color, but maybe risque jokes is there are some interesting names of towns in Lancaster County. One is called Paradise, and another town is called Blue Ball. And the funny thing that people say is you have to go through Blue Ball to get to Paradise.
Well, don't you also? Isn't that also where Intercourse is based?
Yes, Intercourse. Oh wait, did I get it wrong? There's Blue Ball, Intercourse, and Paradise, and they're all. Fluffy Otter should know because I'm not a native Lancasterian. See, and I'm only saying this on Patrick's channel. I wouldn't say it on mine.
I've got no activity, so I can't even be demonetized at this point. So,
but anyway, Fluffy will have to tell us.
So Fluffy Otter is in Berks County, so just east of Lancaster.
Ah, okay, very nice.
So let's see. So I can see you have to get through Blue Balls to have intercourse to get to Paradise. You just have to have a detour into intercourse. You never know.
Yeah. And then there's Bird in Hand. That's another.
Oh, yes.
There's all these little, these little cute little, and all the German names.
Do you get there? Do you go out there very often? Do you find that that's a good picking area, or?
Not very often. I'll say maybe 4 times a year, maybe once every season. There's a lot of antiques out here. So I shouldn't say, yes, it's wonderful. Columbia, Pennsylvania in particular, which sits right on the Susquehanna River, has, it's fantastic. And I spent a lot of time there. Most of these places are old established antique joints with old established antique folk, which is good because they know their stuff, but they know their stuff. So what I'm saying is you can find things, of course, and you can find things for your own collections, and you can find, for instance, today I was in a wonderful antique store called Toll Booth Antiques in Columbia. And here's this late 19th century blanket chest with its original old red paint. $150.
Oh, you're kidding. Wow. I'd figure out a way to bring that home.
I flipped out. I filmed it. It'll be in tomorrow's video. And I hope somebody drives to Toll House Antiques in Columbia, Pennsylvania. It was amazing. It had a wonderful old tin escutcheon. Just a typical, Pennsylvania blanket chest that we see.
That's
fine
construction. I wouldn't even find something of that price out here that wouldn't even have that kind of age. That's crazily cheap. I guess if maybe they have a lot of them, so they don't value them as much as we would here.
Yeah, and furniture is tough. I mean, this is the time. If you like old furniture, this is the time to scoop it up.
Yeah, it's the same here, Scott. The prices on good Georgian mahogany furniture have never been lower. I saw a beautiful bow front mahogany chest of drawers that was Regency period. And 10 years ago, that would have been a $5,000 piece of furniture. And I think it went under the hammer for about $600 or something. Is absolutely the time. I can't understand why people want to buy IKEA furniture that they have to put together that will fall apart in a year, rather than buying something that has been around for 200 years and will be around for another 200 years. I'm delighted that the fashion has fallen off in a way. It just means that I can afford good quality.
That's true. Pick it up while we can, because what's also happening, at least here in the Midwest, everything that's brown is being painted. So they're finding these beautiful old pieces. And in some cases, like I from a business side, there's some cases I can't even fault them. Friends of mine, for those who follow my channel for a while, I had a booth in what was a lifestyle store, and they were taking antiques and trying to sell them in their original finish, and they were sitting for months unsold. Then they slap a coat of white paint on it, and it sold within a day. And so it's that's what the market was looking for, and I get that. But it's you paint everything white, suddenly all the good stuff's going to be gone, and now that furniture is going to go up in price eventually. So, Fluffy Otter agrees 100%. Buyer's market in Pennsylvania.
It is. You really can. So when I said that you're going to get a lot of old established dealers, I don't mean to discourage. I don't mean it pejoratively or to discourage anyone. But people know what they've got. But in many cases, these big furniture pieces are just not selling. And you've also got this older generation, the 80 and the 90-year-old folks that treasured this furniture and were buying it up 40, 50 years ago. And it's, they've held on to it and taken care of it, and it's now freshly on the market, but the demand isn't there for it. So the prices are down, and you can just find, and there were chest after chest after chest of artificially grained, the way that they did. I'm not talking about something that someone painted yesterday, but the artificial graining that was done in the 1880s and the 1890s.
Yeah, not the little rubber tool that you scrape across fresh paint. No.
When they used feathers and they did,
beautifully done.
Milk paint and everything. Nate, is your Regency, the English Regency period, does that coincide with sort of the American Federal period? So late 17 to early 18.
Yeah, I think pretty much. I would put the Regency period at about 1820, a little bit before, a little bit after. I think that was the time of George's son being regent on the throne. I mean, I could be off by a few years, but I would say I'm not sure when the American Federal period is, to be honest.
We're in the same neck of the woods, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Really
I think we may have started earlier because Federal was right around, Constitution era. Yeah. So 1780s to 1810. Did we technically have a Regency period here? Did we do the Ampere waste and all that here in America? Anytime I think of it, I think of the Jane Austen and the British definitions of it. I don't know what the style necessarily, probably eventually came here, but usually our fashions are a little bit later. But because by the Civil War, you still had the huge hoop skirts and.
I guess the Napoleonic, that first empire. Not the 1920s empire revival stuff, but the earlier 1830s, 40s empire, the big, heavy scroll feet and the big, massive. And I like that stuff, but people don't like it.
Yeah, it's an era. I will say that era is not one that I'm particularly well versed in, but yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to jump back. One of the things we were talking about, Nate, with Scott and I were talking about with the Amish, this may be a ridiculously stupid question, but I can't even define the Ampere and the Regency period. Do you have Amish in New Zealand? Or do you even know what the Amish are?
Yeah, I am familiar with the Amish. I'm familiar with the style of the furniture they make and certain things to do with their lifestyles, their the belief in no technology or very little technology. And I'm familiar with a concept, rite of passage called a rumtigger.
I think you just went into Winnie the Pooh. Rumspringer.
Rumspringer, right? I've heard of that concept of young youth of the Amish go away and decide if they want to live the Amish lifestyle themselves, is what I understand it to be. So I'm familiar with them, but no, we don't have any Amish people in New Zealand that I know of.
Okay.
We have Mormons. If that helps.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Mormons. Well, it's interesting. Excuse me. It's interesting that I'm sorry, that when you say Pennsylvania Dutch, it's surprising how many people, well, I guess I'm of German descent, and I was born in Jersey, but my German ancestors were Pennsylvanians, of course, because they recruited Pennsylvanians in droves. But the Pennsylvania Dutch, of course, has nothing to do with Holland or the Dutch, and we love the Dutch and we love Holland, but Dutch meaning Dutch, Deutschland.
Oh, right. German. Is that right?
And leave it to Americans to not know how to pronounce it, so we turn Deutsch into Dutch.
Right, Pennsylvania Deutsch, Pennsylvania German becomes Pennsylvania Dutch, and there were Dutch, of course, in New York. There were Dutch in Jersey, but it's the Germans and the Deutsch, So, and the Pennsylvania Dutch, which is now almost exclusively spoken by the Amish, was more widespread among what the Amish call the English or the non-Amish German folk who spoke this strange half German, half English Pennsylvania Dutch language. There's a university not far from here called Kutztown University, a good, and I think it may be one of the only universities where you can actually study, Pennsylvania Dutch, Pennsylvania Deutsch, and learn it. And but anyway.
Oh, I didn't realize they even offered that. That's actually really interesting. Now, there's a couple things about regions. So Delbert's in Ohio, and so he's saying that there's some in Ohio. I lived in Maryland, and we had a community next to us in Maryland. And I will echo Grace. What Dana is saying is that they made good food. That was where I was introduced to whoopie pies.
What's a whoopie pie? Sorry, what's a whoopie pie?
Whoopie pie is kind of like a dark chocolate cake with a lard cream filling.
Oh, right.
And it's made like a cookie. So there's a cake on the top and a cake on the bottom, and then a thick thing of filling. It's like a massive soft Oreo. Very dangerous. But yes, and they can get very large. And I will say the ones near us, to my knowledge, they were not making furniture. Like sometimes you can find Amish made furniture stores and places. Ours was more of a farming community. I didn't see if they were making it, they weren't selling it. But there was an Amish market. That was when we lived in Maryland. I've driven through some in Iowa. Sometimes when you go through different areas, they've got the big lane off on the side, which is the buggy lane. So you've got that they have their own lane on the highway. So where there's a big population. Are there more in Pennsylvania, Scott, or are they pretty much concentrated in Lancaster County?
Oh, there's a large population in North Carolina. Many of the Amish went to the Winston-Salem area of North Carolina. So there's a big population there. It started in Pennsylvania and then it moved. So you've got a large group in those places in the Midwest. I don't know who has I wouldn't be able to tell you that. But
well, and Tia Fane's saying in Canada, there's Mennonites. And so I was married to the granddaughter. My ex-wife her grandparents were apostolic Christians, which I'd never even heard of an apostolic Christian until I started dating her. And so the way it was described to me was there was Amish, then Mennonite, and then apostolic Christians. Basically, the Mennonites introduced electricity, and the apostolic Christians introduced driving. So like you can do a little bit more. TV was still a bad thing for the apostolic Christians, but it was a little bit more open to technology than the Amish were. But good cooking, and then as Susan said, sewing. So that's another. The ones near us in Maryland, they did showcase their handiwork. That was where my wife started. Actually, that's where she started quilting, because we started seeing all these great textiles and some antique textiles. And so she really got into it, found the quilt store there, and put us into bankruptcy. But Amish have some good sewing as well.
And Grace, I don't mean to interrupt. Grace Patrick says, yes, she's in North Carolina, and that's true. Maybe she can tell us. But there's a large population of Amish in a certain area of North Carolina.
I can't say I know much about North Carolina, so I didn't know that. And then Tracy's saying in Central Illinois, which doesn't surprise me. I'm in Illinois, so it's probably areas that I'm familiar with, but my family was in Nashville, Illinois. And I don't remember running into any there, but that's a little bit farther south, closer to St. Louis. They pop up a lot. Amish in Indiana work at camper factories. Oh, interesting. I guess, they're still manufacturing. So, and I know in Iowa, there's also Amana colonies. So there's Amish in that area, but that's also where Amana appliances were made.
Oh.
Okay, I do not know what a Millerite is. Millerites.
Ah.
I've literally never heard that term before, other than someone who drinks Miller beer. So, what you got? What you got for me, Scott? Do you know what a Millerite is?
Yes and no. I'm going to say no because I'll mess it up. So it's swimming around up here, and it's one of those sects, I believe, or it's a.
Now, what I enjoy is Maria saying that the Amish and Mennonites were witching a mile of her house, which just gives a great image. But she meant within, not witching. So that was fun. And then TFN quite appropriately, the Shakers were celibate. So yeah, a little bit hard to keep that sect going. Yeah. you can't have children.
You got to go through paradise to get
Shakers, Quakers. And Shakers Quakers, is that the same religion?
No.
Or have I got that?
Well, they're Christian. So
are Catholics.
Christian, the umbrella of Christian, right? Catholics, Quakers, Christian. So, but very different traditions.
Right.
And I can't tell you, like the Quakers, we all know from Quaker Oats, they had the beards. They were very sturdy folk. They're still around. The Shakers could, other than the fact that I knew that they believed in celibacy, I think that's the only thing I ever learned about them. I guess I would have guessed that they were Christian, but they could have been the snake biters for all I know.
No, I think they're.
And they were just East Coast, right? Because I think they died out by like the 18th century.
I don't know. Aren't there one or two old Shakers still hanging on somewhere? There's got to be.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I guess you could become a Shaker. Okay, wait. So we got some intel from Tim. Millerites were a strict sect who believed in preparing for the end of the world. The exact date was predicted by their leader. Okay. I've not heard of that. So we've got doomsday preppers. Excellent. The world needs more of those. Amish have good bakeries, wagon wheel donuts.
Smorgasbord.
Wait, okay. Lord of the Dance. All I know about is Michael Flatley. Is that a Shaker hymn? I'm not the person to ask about hymns.
HYMNS. We have they have these Amish style family eatery restaurant type things here where you go in and there'll be this long, I don't know how long, I'm not good with that, like just old fashioned wooden plank picnic table. But imagine a picnic table like 5 lengths, and you just sit down and you don't know who you're sitting next to. You might be by yourself and there might be a family on this side and who knows across you. And they just bring out bowls of 3-bean salad and potatoes and meat, and just it's wonderful. It's sort of like communal dining on this just great big table.
Family style dining. So Heather from Antique Agenda is saying that she'd love to visit PA for an antiquing trip. So again, so that's where you're based. I will say I had mixed results when I came through because my daughter went to undergrad in Pennsylvania. So I did make some trips and I found some nice things for myself. The only thing that I found kind of wide scale that I kind of profited from is because coming from the Midwest, I started a collection of copper luster ware.
Oh, that's right.
So that's a little piece there. And what I discovered is it's not particularly common. It's not rare, but it's not particularly common around here. And so when I would find it, it wasn't like I was paying big bucks for it, but I was paying real money for it. And I ended up going through Pennsylvania, and it was like you guys were using it for ballast. Like there was just hundreds and hundreds of pieces of it that no one saw any value to. And I literally bought a basket, like a shopping basket cart full of like 20 pieces for $5 a piece. And I kept some and I sold the rest and made up all the money that I spent. And they were flabbergasted that I wanted these. When I was checking out, they're like, "Oh, wow. Like, what I think one of this joke, like, are you going to use them for target practice? Like they saw zero value in these. And I'm like, I don't come across them very often. And so it's just a matter, getting to Pennsylvania, you guys, it was just that era. You guys had so much of it and it just never really made itself west. And so people started redecorating. It ended up in charity shops. And so that was my knowledge. So in where you go for antiquing, where do you find, not giving your personal like best picks, but Do you tend to be more eastern Pennsylvania? Do you go to west? Do you go north? Are you better off into Jersey? Where do you like to go, Scott?
I'm sorry, that was directed at me, Patrick.
Yeah. Where do you tend to do like regions of where you find the best antiquing? Where do you like to spend your time?
Wow, that's a tough one. I have to tell you, and people tell me this all the time, you've got so much stuff in your area, and we do. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country. And as you know, the country began here. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, these are the earliest states. These are the 13 colonies. So people have been living in this area, since 16 something, and there's so much. So I am very fortunate that I literally only have to walk out sometimes my back door, and in the alley, behind my building in Philly, someone will dump something off in the trash, and it'll be some awesome, I don't know, 1890s. So there's just so much in this area that I'm spoiled. I don't have to travel. I don't know how else to say it, but there's a tremendous amount in Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania. People say New England has been picked over, but there are a lot of old estates that's coming on the market, and there are
People
a lot
keep
of
dying.
Yes, and you've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul, so stuff winds up all.
Can't take it with you.
Yeah.
Now, do you ever do anything Western Pennsylvania? Like, have you ever gone all the way out to Pittsburgh? Do you find different things available there compared to Philadelphia area?
I have never. Ooh, look at my. I have never. I look like the Sleestack. I have from Land of the Lost. I have never been to Pittsburgh in my life, and it is
You're kidding.
my never. We see. I'm Jersey born and raised. We always went to the shore. We never traveled, and Pittsburgh is a good 4 or 5 hour. And the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
You've got a long state. I think it's even more than 5. It's like 6 hours to get from Pittsburgh, like one side, all the way over to Philly.
Right. It is, and you're on the turnpike, and you're
going through hills.
But it's on my list to go to Pittsburgh. A lot of glass. I want to go out there and tour all the old. That's where all the glass.
Yeah.
That West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, River Valley. That's where all the glass came from.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping to make a trip later, some point in the fall. I'll visit my daughter on the East Coast, and we may meet at the Corning Glass Museum.
Yeah,
so that's like, again, way Western New York. And it's just whatever with the rivers and everything that ran through there. That was where a lot of the manufacturing for glass was done. I don't think Melody's in the chat, but she's in an area, Martinsville. She's in an area where some of the glass was made. Westmoreland, I think, is in Pennsylvania. So it pops up a lot.
Mm-hmm. Grapeville. Everybody, Jeanette. Oh gosh, don't even get started. There were just tons of them.
Now, I think we've had this conversation before, Nate, but what is the antiquing or the vintage world like in New Zealand?
Well, to say that it was small would be an understatement. When eBay came along, a lot of the antique shops simply closed down. A number of them moved about 4 hours south from me to a place called Cambridge, and a lot of them settled in that area. There was never a great amount of them anyway, to be honest. So I think there are probably 5 or 6 antique stores in Auckland, in the city that I'm in, which is the largest city in the country.
And how many people are in Auckland?
1.8 million.
Okay, so pretty sizable.
Yeah.
That's probably comparable to Philly, isn't it, Scott?
Oh no, Philly is the Philly is the 6th largest country in the city in the
Are
U.S.
we thinking a lot of ourselves?
No, I don't even know the population. I need to figure that out. I think it's more like, is it 5 million?
If you include all the suburbs, there's no way Philadelphia is that big by itself. Because Chicago by itself, I think, is only 3 or 4, and we're the third.
Well, I'll go and look, or somebody go and look.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've got all of our Google preppers in the chat, so they'll figure it out.
But should I have my computer muted? By the way,
I'm not hearing any feedback. Are you hearing feedback?
No, is anybody?
No.
Everything is okay. Okay, because I can hear you guys, but I'm listening to you through my computer, and I'm talking. I don't know. I haven't done it.
Yeah,
before.
No, that's how I'm doing it too.
What's
You're
the
totally
population of Philadelphia? Let me see. I'm going to find out.
Oh, Susan to the rescue! 1.58 million. So you're smaller than Auckland.
I did a check. Sorry, my bad. We're 1.65 million.
All right, so Auckland is bigger than Philly.
Well, Auckland, I'll tell you what, you need to have more than 5 antique stores, Auckland.
Yeah,
Come
exactly.
on, Nate. What are you waiting for, Nate? Open up an antique store.
It's trash. The whole thing's trash. I'm really lucky. I have a fantastic auction house, 5-minute walk from my home, and I pretty much get all of my scores at auction, and I find some pretty cool stuff there.
What do you collect, Nate?
I collect English sterling silver. I collect shipwrecked pottery and porcelain. What else do I collect? I collect a lot of things. I've got coins, anything that's randomly interesting in an historical way. I'm interested in. One of my last things that I bought was a silver Malay pubic shield. And I saw it in an auction catalog, and it was a shield that young girls wore in that particular area to show their sexual unavailability.
So like a chastity belt, or is it just decorative?
It is decorative in a way, but it's a traditional Malaysian dress. They were popular in India as well. Now, I tried to do research on them. I couldn't find a single one that wasn't in a museum, a Malaysian one. I couldn't find a single one that wasn't in a museum. I found 2 Indian examples. Of course, bearing in mind the population of India was so much greater than the population of Malaysia. I saw a couple of Indian examples, and they were in the $400 to $450 range, and no one was interested in this. And I got this amazing item for 100 New Zealand dollars, which is $60 US.
And are these? Did you say they're sterling, or what were they made of?
It's silver. I don't know if it's actually a sterling grade. It could in fact be more of a fine silver grade. I don't know, but I picked that up. It's odd. It's weird. It's quite unique. Anything that you would see in a museum, if I see that for sale, I am all over it. I also have my license to collect New Zealand, Polynesian, Maori artifacts as well. So I have a few of those.
Which I think is fascinating that you had to be licensed to collect that.
Sorry, Scott.
What did he say? Not Polynesian. What did you say, Nate? To collect?
Yeah, Polynesian and Maori artifacts.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you do have to be not all items you'd need a license to own or to collect, but there are some that are deemed of a degree of importance that aren't necessarily at a degree that would be a museum piece, although they could be, but they are well represented in museums, so there would be a superfluity of certain items, stone ads and things like that. But you need to have a license to collect them. And I've got my license. I have a few items. And part of that licensing is that you declare to the licensing board where you live at all times. If you move, you would have to go to the licensing board and say, my collection of Maori artifacts are now being housed at this address. And if they were to be sold, if I was to sell them, they would all have to be sold under the caveat that they would need to be purchased by somebody else with a license. Although I
Now,
could
does your
handle
license allow you to sell them, or do you need a separate license to sell?
to deal in them, and I don't know what the threshold is to actually be a dealer, a seller. I would probably be able to sell any of my items through an auction house, but they would be labeled as having strictly only to be purchased by other license holders.
Now,
If I was
if
a
you were to
private
move out of the,
entity,
I'm sorry, what did you say, Nate?
if I was a private entity and I had my antique shop and I was selling these artifacts, I would need a seller's license, a dealer's license.
Now, if you left, like if you moved out of the country, would you be able to take the artifacts with you, or do they need to stay in the country?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure. I would probably, if that actually happened, I would certainly have to contact them to say that I was no longer at the registered address for the artifacts, and whether I'd be able to take them out of the country could actually come down to the artifact itself.
Interesting. My daughter she's currently pursuing her graduate degree in museum studies. And so she's done some internships. And in one of the places that she did an internship, she met one of the board members, and they're a very elderly couple. And she went to their home, and they had a room that just had this amazing museum quality collection of South Korean pottery, ancient South Korean pottery. And so she ended up hearing the story about it. And it was the gentleman had been in business in South Korea, somehow associated with the government. My daughter didn't know the real story, but he started acquiring all this while they lived there for like decades. And then when they decided to come back to the United States, it became an issue of taking those pieces of pottery out of the country. And so they actually struck a deal. The South Korean government sent people to their house, measured every single pot in their collection, and custom made a shipping container to hold each individual pot to then be shipped back to the United States. And then when they pass away, that collection will come back to South Korea. Wow. So it was like they were allowed to leave it, but it's kind of a question of whose ownership is it. So is it is it a donation? My daughter didn't know all the details on it, but it was just a collection in the Midwest you just don't see. It's just these amazing pieces, but it was cultural sensitivity of leaving the country. And so they struck this deal, but then the government got involved. Said, okay, you can take them, but we're going to make sure you package them in a way that they'll actually survive. Wow. So
I do have a collection of Peruvian funereal items that I picked up as a couple of job lots at auction. I like a speculative piece. I like a piece that I can buy at a reasonable price and then do some research on it. I love that.
I love it.
So I bought these two lots, and it's probably about 8 or 9 pieces. And I tell you what, I have never had such a struggle with internet searching as to research Peruvian funereal items. There was just so little information out there. I didn't know how I could authenticate them. And I did. This was, I don't know, about 5 years ago. And then quite recently, they popped into my mind, and I did a little bit more research, and I actually found considerably more information about them. One of my concerns was, they were supposed to be around 1400 to 1600. That was the date that was given with them. And my greatest suspicion was that they looked in such good condition for this level of age. And when I did my more recent research, I found items that looked extremely like them, that were authenticated and looked in equally as good condition. There's something about the glazes and the type of pottery that withstands time being buried. There was a certain burnishing on the black glazes of this pottery, and they are apparently very carefully dug up, and they tend to be in extremely good condition, which made me feel a lot better about my items, because there was this time in my mind where I thought, I've been sold a pig in a poke here. This is just someone's made this in Peru a year ago.
Scott has a question for the class. Go ahead, Scott.
Matt, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Of course.
Nate, 2 questions. First of all, how does one begin collecting Peruvian funereal items? And what is a Peruvian funereal item?
Part of the first question, why do I collect them? I collected them. I have this collection because I saw them at auction. I thought they were fascinating. They purported to be of a decent age. I knew nothing about them and I wanted to know more about them. It's a day before a sale. I'm at a viewing. I see these things and I think, yeah, that's me. That's interesting. They weren't expensive. They were not expensive at all. I think for the 2 lots, I paid roughly 200 New Zealand dollars. So that's 120 US dollars. That's why I had the collection, because I'm curious by nature, I guess. And the items themselves, part of the tradition, apparently, of Peruvian funerals is to bury the dead with wine caskets, glazed earthenware wine bottles. And they come in many forms, usually that loosely resemble animal shapes. I have one that's in a frog shape. I've got one that's in a double head sort of a shape. So they're very interesting to look at, even though they're black, they're monochrome. They're quite stark and quite they're certainly not colorful or anything like that, but they're just interesting to me. That's the sort of thing that when I go to an auction and I see that, that's the type of lot that I want, just like I wanted a Malaysian silver pubic shield. It's not everyone has one.
Well, I sure don't. Well, wait a minute. Let me look around.
So I know that Nate, just from different conversations, Nate does pick up a lot of things from auction, but it sounds like you don't have a lot of other options. Do you do much through auctions, Scott?
No.
Why is that?
Just because they're not as many available, or you just don't have much success there?
No. We have huge auction houses. In fact, there's one in South Jersey called the Dutch Auction. Is it Dutch Auction? It's twice a month and it is massive. I mean, here's the thing with the auction that I find. I am so hyper and I am so, I can't sit at an auction for 8 hours. And I know, like, in many cases, an auction means giving up a lot of time.
Yeah.
I have nothing against auctions, and I probably should go to more auctions. It's actually something that was on my goal, was a goal of mine, and I didn't achieve that goal, was to begin gradually attending auctions. But I just don't go to them. We have them.
Do you have, and I don't know the best way of saying this, but do you have, when I think of Philadelphia, I think you probably have maybe a Sotheby's outlet, you have a Christie's outlet, like you have very high end auctions. Do you have
Freeman's.
like farm auctions? Do you have country auctions? Do you have just regular run of the mill auctions?
Well, the city of Philadelphia has some good auction houses. Freeman's is one of the old venerable. That's an old. That's like woo. That's. I don't know how long they've been there, but it's a good auction house. But then there's plenty of auctions, plenty of estate sales. As I said, we're so densely packed in this region. We live right on top of each other. You don't have to drive very far at all to hit an estate sale or an auction house, or it's just. It's an area rich in diversity and also rich in lots of neat old things. But I wanted to ask also, if I may, another question I already know what it would be for me and Patrick as we live in the US. But I'm curious to ask Nate. In the United States, the rage for many years now has been mid-century modern. It just exploded about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And some of the mid-century modern prices are, topping 19th century American furniture. I'm curious to know, is there a mid-century craze in New Zealand as there is here in the US?
Yep, there absolutely is.
There is.
Yeah, most certainly. It probably happened here in New Zealand later than it happened for you. As did, that whole mid-century period for you would have been the 50s, right? That would have been about the 1950s, maybe into the early 1960s. That sort of stylized, that particular style would have become more popular in the 60s to the 70s here. So we're probably about half a decade to a decade behind. So when you were getting your flower power 70s stuff, we wouldn't probably have got that till the very late 70s or early 80s. So we've always been a little bit behind there. But there was a mid-century movement in the 60s in New Zealand. A lot of it was Danish inspired. So it would be that European mid-century. And there are now, there was actually a shop, a very short-lived shop that popped up that sold a lot of mid-century furniture. The prices were very high. I went in there with my closest friend soon after it opened, and there were not a lot of price tags on things. We walked in. We were walking around for probably about 10 minutes. It wasn't a big shop, and there weren't a lot of prices on things, but the guy that was running the shop was sitting right out the back. He was watching a television or a screen. He never said hello to us. He never asked us if he could help us. I'm not even sure if he actually looked at us, to be honest. And, yeah, exactly. So we ended up sort of walking out of that place. You couldn't even catch his attention, and the shop was closed 3 weeks later, and I sort of put it down to probably the way that he sort of ran that business.
Interesting. Now, I know a lot of what is popular, or a lot of what, based on what you said, what comes through New Zealand, you were very English based. Basically what was popular in England would also be popular in New Zealand, and then also Australia. Was it timing would be the same, or did you get it also like a half decade after England?
We probably would have been more up to date with England in the would have been the late 1970s, 80s. Probably 90% of imports that came into New Zealand came from England, and in those sorts of times, it was very difficult to buy a pair of shoes because, you had only shoes that were being imported from England into New Zealand. It's a long trip. It's a long trip to get there. There was very certain restrictions on styles and things. So we really were so Anglo-centric in our imports for a long period of time. But most certainly, we are part of the Commonwealth. We're part of the Commonwealth. The Queen is still our head of state, in essence, and there are a lot of English people that settled here. My mother was a £10 immigrant to New Zealand. She paid £10 for her fare to come over from England to New Zealand to boost the population of the country. Which was
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
So what did she call it? A £10 import?
£10 immigrant.
Immigrant.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, regarding, let's not talk about the trafficking of people, but as we're transporting goods, as part of the Commonwealth, do you pay less for import duties and taxes than you would for something coming from the United States?
Whew, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
Okay.
I really don't. Although I know I notice certain things that postage is cheaper to come to New Zealand from Canada than it is to come to New Zealand from the US.
Really?
Even though essentially the US is closer.
Okay.
It is noticeably cheaper to mail from Canada to New Zealand than from the US to New Zealand.
I think New Zealand is on a lot of people's bucket list because of Nate. Everyone wants to visit Nate. So you talked about some of the things that you had picked up. I know Scott did a little bit of shopping recently, and you have a little find with you. You showed it earlier. Could you want to show your candlestick?
Oh, show and tell.
But also, Nate, I am so envious because I love Art Deco, and the Americans didn't embrace. A little bit in the American cities, but we did not embrace Deco as much as the English did. And I know you've got a lot of it. There's so much wonderful Deco glass and porcelain.
Yeah.
And I don't mean American streamline, but you've got a lot more of the Deco that I love in your neck of the woods than we do here in the US. But so I'd come over to meet Nate and to find some Art Deco.
Well, there's a place in New Zealand, Napier Hastings, where there was an earthquake in the 1920s, and it was rebuilt as a Deco city. So almost all of the buildings are in the Art Deco style, and they stay in that style. They're still painted in those Art Deco colors. There's an Art Deco festival there every year, obviously not in recent times due to COVID. But there is a large interest in the Art Deco period in New Zealand, and most certainly, and when you do go into an antique store, you will see, without a shade of a doubt, items that reflect the Art Deco style. There's always something in the auction that's in the Art Deco style.
What was the name of the town that was wiped out by the earthquake that rebuilt?
It's either Napier or Hastings.
Napier, okay.
They're right next to each other, and I want to say it's Napier, but it could just as easily be Hastings.
It's just, I think that's a worldwide thing. Natural disasters wipe out a town. Because what's the one in New Jersey? Is it Cape May? What's the one that was wiped out along the seaside? They rebuilt everything's a Queen Anne Victorian. Scott? Is it Cape May is was ringing a bell, but you would know better than I do.
Well, Cape May is just like one of the Victorian. If you like Victorian houses, Cape May is off the hook.
Yeah, I think they were wiped out by a hurricane in like 1895,
and then everything.
And so when they rebuilt, they just built whatever was vernacular at the time. So it was all Queen Anne Victorians.
Ocean Grove is the same way. It just.
So do you want to do a little show and tell, Scott? I know you had a little toy there that you were showing us earlier, your candlestick phone.
I can. I've got a couple little things I can show you.
You didn't expect to do anything. I just knew you had the one. And you kind of gave us a sneak peek of it. And you shared something about it that I'd never heard before. So I'd love you to be able to share that with everyone. And I'll grab one of my show and tells of something that I bought.
Get it. I hope it's in the frame. So there's nothing unusual about a candlestick telephone, mass produced. You have Northern Electric in Canada. We have Western Electric. This is an earlier one because there's no dial on it. So, we have to, hello Central, give me, that's the way they did it in those days. Later on, you have the, the dial. But the reason why I picked this one up for not much money is the receiver has what you'll see are the exposed terminals. And you know how I just love my industrial stuff. So obviously this was modernized and changed but you've got the 2 exposed terminals on the top of the receiver. And this is all original. Look at the dirt on that, or the dust. So this is an earlier receiver. The candlestick telephone itself has a 1915 patent on it, but this was the receiver alone, $100, $130 all day long, just the receiver. Forget the actual phone itself. And we have there's no ringer with this. There's no ringer box. There's nothing. It's just, hello Central, give me circle 1, 2, 3, 4, and you hope you get the right number. But I really like the exposed terminal on this. But just all original. You can see it's been sitting in somebody's attic.
Now, because until you pointed it out, I couldn't even tell you what I would normally see. If the terminal isn't exposed, do the wires go into the body of it, or are they covered? Okay.
Yes, Patrick. All you'll see is this one wire, and it will go into the top of the receiver, and it'll just be, you'll have a Bakelite cap with just one little hole on the top, and all this mess is not exposed.
So how do you tell that just the cap isn't missing? How do you know that it's supposed to be exposed, not that that cap was broken off?
Because the cap is actually threaded.
Oh,
and
okay.
This has a cap. This has a cap which is threaded and screwed onto the top.
But the terminals are on top of that. Okay.
Right. And so the terminals would be embedded inside the receiver, and there would be a Bakelite cap that's threaded, and there's a hole in the top that the cord goes in. So it's just completely different from that. So
how many examples would you standardly see? How regularly would you see one that has the cap on it as opposed to this one with the exposed? Or
Good
even
question.
How many examples would you see that have the dial on them in comparison to those with the cap as opposed to those with just the exposed terminals?
That gets a little bit out of my area of expertise, and I wouldn't want to say because I would just be guessing. But this is earlier, and this is harder to find, not rare, but most of the time when you find a candlestick telephone, you're not going to find the exposed terminals on the top of the receiver, which is kind of neat. And these are still out there. A lot of people prefer, what is the phone made of? Well, it's metal and it's painted black. The receiver is Bakelite. Sometimes they're brass, and sometimes they're brass, and then the black paint is over top of the brass. But
is at the mouthpiece there seems to be a shinier spot? Is that just a reflection, or is it?
It's a reflection. Yeah.
At the very bottom of the opening of the mouthpiece,
right there.
Yeah.
That's paint.
Oh, that's just okay. I didn't know if that was the metal coming through.
No, it's paint. Somebody painted their house and they splashed paint. You know how it is.
Yep, absolutely.
Would there be any possible way of getting that rewired to be able to make it remotely working?
Absolutely.
Wow.
You have to get it right. Yeah. So anyway, I really can't wait to be stuck in traffic and at a stoplight when there are people to my left and right. I'm going to pull this off of my front seat and carry on a really angry conversation. Yeah, right.
Well, the millennials wouldn't even know what you were holding.
No, they wouldn't.
I've seen videos of young people looking at modern phones with a turning dialer and not understanding how they work.
I just did our signal lace, and we had a rotary phone, and we had to teach people how to use it. They did not. The younger members of the cast couldn't figure out what they were supposed to do. They were obviously just pretending, but we were like, well, you need to look like you're dialing a phone, and they couldn't figure it out.
Wow.
What is it?
Hat pin holder? No.
Hors d'oeuvres. There's a hole at the bottom.
Yeah, but
it doesn't look like it'd be a stoppered hole. So I would go with an hors d'oeuvres picks.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're
I've got a quail shaped one for my Red Wing Pottery bobtail bob white collection. It's a shape of a quail. Oh, yep. So we had hors d'oeuvres. We got that. TFA guessed talcum powder. That was why I looked to see if there was a hole in the bottom to something to fill it. But that would spread talcum powder large and wide. There's a lot of holes in a lot of directions.
That sort of comedic pieces of pottery, that's something we don't really see here. It's just, I see them in lots of sales, and it's all of that is just not, it's not here. We don't get Hager here. We don't get what's the Treasure Craft. I've never seen any of that here.
Well, count your lucky stars that you don't get Treasure Craft. We protected you from that one.
What did you say about Treasure Craft?
We protected them from that one. They should be lucky that they don't have it.
I have to say I'm not a Treasure Craft fan myself, but. And
Hager is everywhere here because it was made down the street. So I trip over Hager, just walking down the street. So,
oh,
it's got a cord.
It's a light of some
interesting.
Sort.
A one-piece lamp, or is the shade separate? So just like a little boudoir lamp, nightstand.
Can you see it? What does it say?
Made in. I can't see it on mine.
Made in. Oh, I can't quite make it out either.
I don't have you at full screen, so I can't see it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's made in Czechoslovakia, and it's a lamp base missing whatever was on the top of it. Now, there were just hundreds of examples of novelty lamps in the 1920s and 30s, and this is typical 1930s glass. This is the way it was made here in America, and Bohemian glass, Czechoslovakian glass. And they made a lot of figural lamps. A lot of you will have seen the parrot lamp. There's a parrot, or a tropical bird made out of glass. And he sits on a base with a light bulb. And they're just novelty lamps. It was a new, everyone was being electrified in the 20s and 30s, and you could have these novelty radio lamps, or just, you didn't read the newspaper by them, but they were, as I said, novelty lamps. Because the circumference is so big, I feel as though this would not have been a pair of boudoir lamps, but something figural sat on top of this, or some other type of a glass shade. And there's lots of examples of various shades that could have sat on this as a small table lamp, Czechoslovakian table lamp that would have been, sold in this country in the 1930s. It's great to find the base.
That's really interesting. Yeah, we'll see if like Danny was just saying, hopefully you'll find the topper someday and you'll have to share it with us.
Yeah. Whatever it was, it fit down over the top. And as I said, it could have been figural. It could have been a shade in the shape. I've seen them not really almost in the shape of like the top of a Christmas tree, but not to represent Christmas or anything. But yeah, I was really happy to find that.
Cool.
And I will echo what Poodle and Maria are saying. So George, the Antique Nomad, literally wrote the book on Treasure Craft. I have that book. He was gracious enough to sign it for me. I bought it from him, and it's a great reference. And it's very much of my childhood, which is why I really don't want to see it again. But there's nothing particularly wrong with it. But it's a very specific aesthetic. And as Bren said, she's in Hawaii. So it very much would fall into a great kitsch collection of all that. They made some very, very specific types of material, and the Polynesian, the Middle Pacific designs, Polynesian designs were definitely one of their strong suits. But what we tended to see in the Midwest was just all the fake wood grain canister sets and things like that. And, we don't need that. So Tim is saying in Canada, it's actually rare and very expensive. I could see it being rare because you Canadians, as a rule, have good taste. But I'm surprised it's also very expensive, I guess, because it's rare. Interesting.
I have that book too. George was kind enough to gift it to me and put in a little note inside. And I have 2 pieces of treasure craft that have been sent to me by viewers of my channel, which is lovely.
Fantastic. I had 2 pieces that I was going to show. These actually I picked up on one of my business trips about a month or so ago, but it's been it's literally been almost 2 months since I've done a live chat. But for those that have followed my channel, you know that I collect Austrian porcelain. So this is RSTK porcelain from the Stellmacher family. This is the largest I've ever seen, and I had to have it. So it's in absolutely pristine condition. All the lattice work is still intact. The handles are still intact. Nothing was glued on. It's stamped with the RSTK stamp. So this puts it around 1905. And so I've got just all this beautiful, like borderline Art Nouveau, but the German versions of it, getting into Jugendstil. There's just a great connection of that. It's decorated both front and back. And got that on my etagere with, I've got about a dozen or so pieces now, but this is by far the largest. And then some people saw me pick up that. People were trying to, including Scott, were trying to help me date the piece behind me. Pretty much determined that was a reproduction from the mid 20th century, around the 1950s. So I started looking for older pieces of toll painted metalware. And this one, pretty sure, is 19th century. So it's got this great bird design with the fountain in the middle and the florals, an absolutely gorgeous painted design around the edges. It looks fantastic. It actually sits behind some of the porcelain pieces and flower frogs that I've got on that etagere. So I happened to pick these both up at the same place, an antique shop in Minneapolis that Catherine Young had told me about. So every time I go to Minnesota for business, I make sure I stop at that shop and picked those 2 pieces up and absolutely loved it. Because I do not come across this style of the Austrian porcelain very often. Michael Todd also collects Austrian porcelain. He does a slightly different era. I find what he collects, I find his more often than this. And so when I find it, particularly when it's marked, I definitely want to pick it up. And I'm still trying to educate myself on the trays. It's one of those, it's hard online. It's hard to really be able to tell from pictures, what you really got. A lot of the sellers don't know what they have. So it's kind of trying to find the right things. But this one I saw in person, and just the coloration on it, I could just tell at a glance that this one had a little bit more age to it than the one that was behind me. So help kind of just, you've got to train your eye. And in some cases, you just buy what you love. And I absolutely loved this one. So picked that up as well, and we'll hopefully find some more of those.
I think I told you when you first showed me that Jardinier, it's very reminiscent of English Royal Worcester and the blush, a range that they call blush. Very, very simple. In fact, from across the room, I would look at that and say, oh, that's Royal Worcester blush.
I find Royal Worcester far more often than I find the Turnteplitz region of Austria. The biggest difference, and you're probably not going to be able to tell it on the screen, but if you look at the side, you can see it's kind of got that Moriage, it's got the raised paint going around the edges. Royal Worcester didn't do that. Theirs was flush painted, or at least the ones that I found. They're all flush painted. So that's the easiest way that I can tell at a glance without even turning it over. Doesn't mean I won't ever pick up a piece of Royal Worcester. I've got a couple pieces that are not signed that I think one of them might be Royal Worcester because it does have more of that flat finish, but I like that bisque finish to it as opposed to the super shiny finish. And Royal Worcester also does some. Now you're calling it, what did you call it? Blush?
Blush. I've
Okay,
never
that term
known
I'm not familiar with. Oh, what do we got? That term I'm not familiar with, so I don't know. Maybe that's the matte finish versus some of the ones I found are shinier. So what's Scott pull out there?
I've never known a piece of Royal Worcester not to be marked. Royal Worcester, when pottery and porcelain crashed in prices a few years ago, Royal Worcester still maintained its value quite well. All of it. The only ones that really did suffer a little bit was the blush range. It was produced in such greater quantities. It wasn't the hand painting of the classic artists, the Stintons that worked in the factories, and people will collect and pay huge amounts of money for a Harry Stinton painted piece of Royal Worcester.
I think just what dictates price across the board, it's what becomes in vogue and what's in style. And decorating with this style of heavy, ornamented, hand-painted porcelain, that's not, everyone wants farmhouse. That's not that in a proper farmhouse, you might see something like that because they'd have their nice stuff too. Turn of the century, they got it as a wedding gift. They could absolutely have beautiful pieces like that in their little curio cabinet that they'd have in their front parlor. People in the Midwest, we know what farmhouses actually look like. And what Magnolia Farms does isn't really replicating a true farmhouse. It's creating a very different aesthetic. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a very different aesthetic that heavy brown wood, heavily ornamented porcelain, even Deco glass getting in a Scott's soft spot. That's the stuff it doesn't fit. It's not the aesthetic. But you stick with that aesthetic, it gets very, very dull. So now the lamp that you bought, Scott, are you going to be keeping that for yourself, or are you going to keep it until you find the top to it and sell it?
I haven't decided yet. What I definitely will do is try to find out exactly what was on that base, which is going to take me a little bit of time. I've got to dig through all of my Czechoslovakian Art Deco 1930s lamp books and resources and try to find out. I'm also going to take it to a dealer in Adamstown in one of the big antique. I think it's blah, 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 blah. I can't remember which one it is. But there is a gentleman that is a proprietor of a shop in there, and he deals in antique lighting, and the place is massive. And he has dozens of Bohemian and Czechoslovakian lamps of that era. All I need to do is just walk right in with that base, and he'll go, yep.
Now, Scott, a little while ago, and I'm sorry I haven't really caught up with the progress of it, you were restoring a doll's house. Isn't that right?
Oh, yes.
I've got some sterling doll's house furniture that I picked up many, many years ago and had forgotten all about until I came across it in a box. I have a bit of a fascination with doll's houses, to be honest. There's actually a television program on here in New Zealand at the moment, and it is of the type of television program where you have teams of people who decorate rooms, but they decorate doll's house rooms, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm thoroughly addicted to the program. It's as fascinating, as interesting as the real house renovations, and often just as bitchy and interesting. How's the doll's house coming along? Sorry, I'm not keeping up with that.
It's coming along well. The more I get into it, the more I discover the way that it was built. And it was built. It was a project. It was a home built house, Tudor revival style. So it dates to the early 1920s when that was all the rage here in the United States, just behind colonial revival. And the tricky part now is the electric lighting, because the way this thing was built, it was just over-engineered and overbuilt. And I mean that in a positive way, not detracting from the person who built it. This person did not have popsicle sticks and a bottle of Elmer's glue. Everything is put in place with tiny screws, and
Wow.
if one screw would hold a piece of wood in place, this guy put in 12 screws. But it's got antique now Christmas tree lighting wiring embedded in between the floors, and actually getting in there to do the rewiring is a little puzzling without actually having to take more apart
Right.
than I really want to. So and it's been so hot. It's been hot all over the world. I know that, not just here, but it's currently in my mother's garage, and I've taken a break because I'm not going out in that sweltering garage, but I continue to work on it. I did rebuild the staircase using old clothespins, the way that the banister was, the way the staircase was made. Part of it had broken off. So little bit by little bit. And I just restored the lighting in the fireplace. There actually was a lighting underneath the foundation of the house in the crawl space so that the fireplace would light up. And the wiring was crazy, but I got in there and I redid that. And I found inside of the fireplace the back of a kitchen chair. The kitchen chair was original to the house, and many folks, including my former college roommate, recognized the kitchen chair as a Schoenhut, which is an American toy company chair. And it dates it right to that, circa 1928 to 1933 era. How the back of that kitchen chair fell into the fireplace, we'll never know. But I've been making little discoveries and really I appreciate you asking, and I thank you for asking. It's been a lot of fun to work on it.
I'm sure it has.
Damn kids ruining the dollhouse. What are they doing? They shouldn't play with that. There's actually a channel I follow on Facebook that I was sitting here trying to find, and I just can't remember the exact name of it, so it's not coming up. But he is a miniaturist artist that he doesn't refer to them as dollhouses, but he makes them. And one of his more famous ones was he recreated the house from Charmed. So the 1880s aesthetic movement. Now I can't even think of the term, but anyway, the 1880s style.
Morris
and it did all the way down to the stained glass panels in the windows. Like, he just recreated that house exactly as it was in the television program. So it was some of that stuff can get fascinating. I have never been, even when my daughter was little, was never into some of that because I don't have the patience to deal with stuff that small. I never did models. I never did that. It needs to be bigger, and it needs to be faster. That meticulous nature is not something I've ever been particularly interested in. So bless you, Scott, that you're trying to resurrect that, and you've got the patience to do it. And I know you'll do some great work on it. Well, I'd only plan on being on for an hour, and we're already running up. We've run past that. So unless I didn't mean to cut you off, you had something you wanted to say, Scott?
No.
Or if it was Nate, I thought I cut one of you off.
I think Nate.
I was just going to say that, I really appreciate those professionally built miniature houses, those dolls houses, but I can't help but sort of prefer those homemade ones where you know that a father has lovingly spent countless hours on producing a toy for his daughter, hand making all that stuff for his child. There's something so sweet and so lovely and wholesome as the homemade doll's house.
Well, so I'm not sounding like the Antichrist. I put a lot of love when I write the check and charge that credit card for buying gifts for my daughter. So, it carries the same weight for me. we can do what we can do. So yeah, Fluffy Otter also enjoying the dollhouse restoration. You haven't done a lot of lives, Scott, but I know the last live you did was actually to talk and take questions about the dollhouse. So if you're not subscribed, Scott is The Old Curiosity Shop, so you can find him on YouTube. Not big into social media, so you're just going to find him on YouTube, but he's got some great hauls, got some great items. Definitely follow him. I'm sure you all subscribe to him already.
Thank you.
But and then Nate, somebody actually just commented in the chat that they just subscribed to you. They had not subscribed to you yet. So Nate is more active in Instagram as well, but we're always trying to push him to do some more channels, more videos for his channel, because he has some amazing collections. And as he said, quite diverse. But when he goes diverse, I introduced him to Not Geld, and the next day he's like, I just bought 600 pieces. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
I compulsive. It's true. You know.
Oh, that's the one. Art. I was looking up Levenger. I couldn't think of what it was called, but I knew something was capitalized. So it's Art Hubert Langdorfer, and that is the miniaturist artist. And he's doing another piece right now. I just saw a post within the last couple of days. I'm not on there regularly, but it's just fascinating. And the true test for anyone who doesn't get into miniatures, the true test of a quality miniature is when you take a picture of it, you can't tell it's a miniature.
Yeah.
And the photographs he puts on his channel, he'll always put a couple of there I think it's just Facebook. He'll put the photograph in, and then one of them, his finger will be like on the staircase. It's like, whoa, that looked like the real thing. Like that, it's amazing the quality of work that he's done. So yeah, thank you so much, Heather, for finding that. I tried combinations, but I wasn't finding the exact one. So.
Yeah, and you see Tim's comment about Frances Glesner Lee. Those dioramas of crime scenes are absolutely incredible. Check her out. Fascinating. Truly fascinating.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate both Nate and Scott joining in tonight, and all of you joining into the chat. I don't know when I'll be back. Next week I'm on the road. I will be in Nebraska. Yay. So it's unlikely. I think the cows can run the internet there, but probably not going to be doing anything from the road. I am finishing up Clue this weekend, and because I'm heading into my travel season, I probably won't be doing any more theater, but because I'm going to my travel season, I also will have a harder time doing anything for regular shows. So I maybe get back. I may be doing some sales. Follow me on Instagram. I did do a YouTube drop sale with Beth from Carolina Princess Sweet Treats and Pretties. So you can always catch things that way. But I want my channel to be more than just about sales. So I actually did a trip. I was in Iowa earlier this week, captured a whole bunch of video of the historic downtown of Waterloo, Iowa. And I'm hoping I can string that together into a semi-interesting video. Could be boring as hell, but I'm going to see if I can turn it into something. Because there is some absolutely amazing architecture there, including an original 1930s Hostess snack cake factory which is now a brewery. So some great adaptive reuse. The 1930s post office with its original Works Progress Administration murals is now the public library. So I've got video of that, and I was able to take pictures of the murals because of the public building. So hopefully string some of that together. I just want to have more. I want to put some content out there, but not have it just be about sales. Don't mind money, but that's not what I set out this channel to do. So hope you all had fun. I appreciate again Scott and Nate joining in, and everyone else. Thanks for putting your trust in Trusty Huckster. Have a great night. We'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you. Bye, Nate, and bye, Patrick. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for joining.